Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the impacts of Russia-Ukraine war. And obviously, what we have learned so far that during the last 6 months of the Russian invasion, thousands of the people, they have been killed, including soldiers. Millions have been displaced. And when you talk about the global economy, obviously, the forecast is that there's going to be a very slow economic growth. Perhaps most of these targets will not be met. And on top, we are looking at the reaction of the global money markets. Obviously, uncertainty is one of the primary issue. You talk about the surge in the gas prices, especially when you talk about LNG. Within 1 year, what we have witnessed that the prices have gone up by 10 times. Obviously, European need for energy is there. But having said that, since there are a lot of sanctions imposed on Russia, which was the major supplier of energy resources, whether you talk about coal, or you talk about oil, or you talk about natural gas. Now, just look at the example of Germany, for that matter. The kind of pressure Germans are facing at the moment is unbelievable. The surge in the gas prices, plus it is not only about the limited supply, but what if it is cut? It is going to be an absolute disaster. Giving you just one example, and that is about zinc. In order to keep it in the liquid form, you need energy. And just imagine one of the plants, which is owned by an individual over there, says that roughly you need, let's suppose, X amount of gas in order to keep that zinc liquid so that we can store it. But now, just imagine that that X amount is into 10X. So it is not only about the price hike, it is also about the supply issue, which is creating this problem, because you never know tomorrow if there is a complete cut-off from the Russian side, what will happen. So many people will get unemployed. And then on top, when you talk about the overall recession, now we're not talking about the global slowdown of the economic growth. We are focusing on the European side, and that's tremendous. That's how the stock markets, they react. They react because uncertainty prevails. And then when it comes to certain decision-making process, you wait and see. It's been 6 months. Everybody thought that the war is going to be over within 6 weeks initially, but this is lingering on. There's a lot of support for Ukraine from the European Union as well as NATO countries, and on top, United States of America as an individual country. It has really helped Ukrainians fight against the Russians. And perhaps it seems that the longer the Russians will be engaged in Ukraine, the West is going to get the benefit. But obviously there are mixed trends as well. Ruble is one currency that has really gained strength against the dollar, whereas when you talk about euro, you talk about pound, yen, yuan, Pakistani rupee, Indian rupee, Hong Kong dollar, they have all weakened. Now, where are we heading? And especially another very important factor, forget about energy for the moment. Let's talk about the food crisis, the grains. 30% of the overall grain production comes from Russia and Ukraine. Now, a limited supply has started, but still blockades are there. The exporters and the importers are again very uncertain. The risk premium for those involved in this business, it has gone up multiple times. So you can well imagine there are various angles associated and attached with it, which makes everything so volatile. Central banks are tightening their monetary policy to control inflation. Yes, perhaps that is something of prime concern, but if you look at the inflation, let's talk about United Kingdom, highest ever in 40 years. Especially for the first time, people are actually feeling the pressure of expensive energy supplies. And then last but not the least, weaker growth, high inflation, long-lasting damage to supply chains. This is the real name of the game at the moment. Now, to talk about this, let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Faheem Sardar Saab. Faheem Saab needs no introduction, is a senior economist and a strategist. Thank you very much for your time. And we have with us from Paris, France, Karel, Vereycken, a political analyst from the Schiller Institute. Pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you very much for your time. And we'll also be talking to Hasan Abdullah, correspondent TRT World, associated with the Turkish broadcast channel, and he's going to join us around 8:30, say another 20 minutes from now. And we'll also hear from him that what's going on, because we learned that the Turkish president, Mr. Erdogan, in fact, paid a very important visit and met the Ukrainian leadership along with a couple of other global leaders, the people from the European side, as well as I would call them the decision makers, the movers and the shakers of Europe. Let's see where is that heading and what sort of an impact that particular visit will make. But let me put the first question to you, Faheem Sardar Saab, because since it's a very complicated issue, it has got multiple dimensions. Let's start off from the energy. The supply chain, the setup, and when we talk about the infrastructure that was available for the entire European Union, and primarily we all know that in certain countries it was 100% clear that their energy demands are met from the Russians. We talk about Finland and the countries like Italy, or you talk about Germany for that matter, and so many other, Switzerland, Austria again. Now, the European Union, along with the NATO countries, and now the Americans are also persuading Finland and Sweden to be a part, which most likely they will become. And if you look at the historic perspective, it's a very different ball game. There was a time when Sweden controlled Denmark, and then later on Denmark gained independence. They gained independence, they had their Greenland. But talking about the other sides, they were part of the Russians. Now, looking at that reality that Russians always dominated the Eastern Bloc. They were the major suppliers of energy. And now, since sanctions have been imposed, whether you talk about the supply of food or you talk about the supply of fertilizer, 70% of the fertilizer is produced in Russia. Global impact is there because everything is slowing down. Uncertainty is the name of the game, sir. As I earlier mentioned, that we all thought that 6 weeks are more than enough. The Russians will take over Ukraine. But it's been 6 weeks, there's a lot of resistance. We do not know what's going on. But it seems that the Ukrainians are not that, fragile to be taken over so easily. It is not going to be a hostile takeover in any case. What do you see, sir? What will happen and where are we heading?
Thank you for having me. I think it's a very it's a telling event because I think war is back on European territory after a very long time. Coming straight to economics and to energy dependency, 40% of all consumption of Europe is met by Russian supplies. So I mean, Europe finds itself pretty stuck in how it's going to extricate itself from its dependency on Russia. At the same time, when you've got Nord Stream 1 and 2, they're active, Nord Stream 2 especially for Germany and perhaps for other countries. But what's most important is that Russia has the energy capacity to, they've analyzed all of this, it appears, that they have the energy, the gold, and the backup to sort of push through some agenda. But
and the food.
And the food. And what was, of course, meant to be a small military operation, just to quote the Russians, has turned into a 6-month-long, unending, prolonged war. And you have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the West is completely involved through proxies or through whatever. You have the Azov Brigade that's also there. You have other militias from the West. They've come to fight in Ukraine. So it's turning into a much bigger melting pot than it originally was. Coming straight to economics once again, you see, it's important for us to understand that oil prices and wheat prices have fluctuated very, in a very violent way. And we have to bear in mind that this is coming out of COVID. During COVID, the world sort of united towards fixing.
They had common goals at that time.
Exactly, and at that time, at the end of COVID, around about a year ago, more than a year ago, perhaps I think 14, 15 months ago, the IMF said that it's expecting a 5 to 6% growth rate for the world, for the globe. That 5 to 6% has now come down to 3.3%.
Almost half.
Yes, and they were gradually, IMF has had to sort of chip away at that growth rate. So it's very clear that many factors are contributing to the world's issues, one of which is the Ukraine issue. You have wheat, which I just checked the prices, so right now it's at $334 a ton, and this went up to $440. Prior to this invasion, it was $290. Prior to that, some time back, it was even less than that. Oil went up to $120, and now it's come sort of easing up a little bit. But when international prices fluctuate so violently, you see they always have an impact on financial markets, and that has been resonated not only by local commentators here, but international financial institutions as well. IMF has had the same thing as well. So we have to sort of bear in mind that this is not just a military or a regional conflict or something of the sort. It has ramifications throughout the world.
But so these two economies, I mean, whether you talk about Russia or you talk about Ukraine, they're not huge economies, but look at the impact they have created on the entire globe.
Yes, because of two reasons. Number one, we are already heading towards the butterfly, wings of the butterfly concept, because everything has become so ingrained with each other, interconnected with each other, so that if one event has an effect on another. But having said that, if you look at the commodities that are being affected, these are not luxury commodities, these are necessity commodities, utility commodities, wheat, food. You have oil, which, oil runs everything. So there is a reason, for example, I mean...
Edible oil, wheat, barley, sunflower cooking oil. You talk about fertilizer, you talk about even the military hardware. Like Pakistan uses RD-93 engine in JF-17.
Yes, they're from Russia.
And that is normally imported from... Normally, I mean, that is a Russian product.
It's a Russian product.
So if you want to overhaul your engines, I mean, everything is linked in one way or the other.
And I mean, not that we've talked about China, but basically if you just look at the electronic vehicle sales, China is at the forefront. But why? Because it's trying to stay away from the fossil, it's trying to wean itself off the fossil paradigm. So in summary, it's not just a military operation or a conflict between Russia and the West. There is a lot of history between Ukraine and Russia.
Definitely.
I won't get into that. But I'm speaking specifically on the economics of this whole scenario, and it causes a lot of turbulence, and you can feel it across the entire global spectrum.
All right. Now coming to you, Mr. Karel, since you are in Paris, one of the biggest economies of Europe is definitely France as well, when you talk about England perhaps, or you talk about Germany. But now the kind of pressure that a normal man is facing because of this war, let's tell us, let's educate us, let's enlighten us. What exactly is going on? What's brewing in the mind of a common man?
Well, if France would be isolated, it has a very low dependency on, for example, Russian gas. That would be only 15%, because France gets up to 70% of its electricity out of nuclear power. Then we diversified our supplies by turning to Norway, Algeria, Azerbaijan. So there are other options. The problem is that France is a member of the European Union, and that the governments are supposed to share the burden of the whole energy crisis overall. So the main worry, in reality, the main worry is to have Germany go into a full-scale depression, which would then impact on the entire Eurozone. Because there was the chief economist of ING. He said that the price of energy went up by 500. Price of electricity in Germany on August 16 was 500% higher than 1 year before, and this means the chief economist of ING He said this could mean the end of the German model, which was to buy cheap energy and then to build expensive technology and machines which they can sell at a very high price. And that's exactly what it will do, because Europe, we're losing the market. We're losing access to raw materials, which are like titanium or raw materials from the Russian and Central Europe and Central Asia area. We have the higher impact, the huge impact of the cost of energy. And then we have the drought, which is real. The water in the Rhine and the Danube is below 40 centimeters, which means the ships who do inland navigation, they cannot ship anymore the goods from one place of Germany to another place. So the producers have to find alternatives by trucks and trains, but it's much more expensive. And then we have the clash over Taiwan, which will probably impact on the microchips production. And then we have the higher interest rates in the US, which are attracting capital to leave Europe. And then the European Commission is asking everybody to consume less, which means, who wants to invest, in an area which is committing suicide? Because it's not Russia which is imposing sanctions. Europe is self-inflicting sanctions on itself, and that's it. So I agree with Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, who said that beyond the recession and the depression, we can very well go into a chain reaction of bankruptcies, which will blow up the entire system, which is kept artificially alive since 2008. In 2008, we were told that this was a liquidity crisis and not a solvency crisis. So they started printing all the money, and then they were very happy COVID arrived and that now the war arrives, because now they have a good pretext. Because the real source of inflation is not the war and COVID. The real source of inflation is money printing to save bankrupt banks, which should be put in an orderly bankruptcy reorganization and end up in a new kind of Bretton Woods to re-regulate the international trade and to have a just economic order.
Now, since you talked about this additional money being printed, this is a very regular phenomena. Whether you talk about United States of America, because dollar is their own money, you just print as much as you want to, whether a trillion. And this is what they have done even during the COVID times. Now, tell me one more thing, since you mentioned that most likely it could be a reality in the future that so many XYZ, let's say, companies with A ratings and A plus ratings might go bankrupt. This is what we have witnessed even during the time of the recession in 2007-8. Now, tell me one more thing. We have learned that most of the European countries, they are also increasing the interest rate to keep a check on the inflation. But when you talk about printing more money, that means, that there's a direct conflict between increasing the interest rate, printing more money. So more money is available, but at a higher interest rate, nobody's going to take that money. So basically, I fail to understand the equation they are trying to set here, sir. Let's throw light on that.
Well, they are between a hammer and a hard place. If they increase interest rates, then production will be sanctions. This is what's happening in, for example, even in the US with the housing. The construction of new houses is collapsing in the United States.
Correct.
Because the interest rates went up. But if they don't do that, then banks will not have a profit. They cannot survive without interest rates. They cannot survive with negative interest rates, and especially they will. If you want to save the paper money, you have to make it very expensive, and which means destroying even more the economy, the physical economy. The problem is you don't learn about physical economy in university. You learn about monetarism and playing around with statistics and money. You don't learn about production and creating the conditions where we can feed more people on the world in a decent condition.
All right, coming to you, Faheem Saab. Obviously, when we talk about these OPEC countries, what we learned initially especially when Mr. Biden was visiting Saudi Arabia, there was this discussion regarding the increase in the supply.
Yes.
All right. So the case is with most of these OPEC countries. But sir, maybe they have increased it to a certain level, but the impact hasn't been seen yet. Maybe a very little one. But now, sir, on one side, they think that the supply is the issue. You know, if there is more supply or production is increased, it is going to stabilize the increasing price of crude oil. Now, at the same time, we are also looking at it a very slow growth. I mean, you just mentioned that it is going to be about 3.3%. Let's say 3.5%. Okay. Let's be a little optimistic.
Sure.
But at least even from 5% or 6%, we'll choose the lower one, 5 to 3.5%. Let's see that 1.5% difference. So that is a huge one, and especially when you talk about oil. I mean, everything is interlinked directly or indirectly. I mean, explain this equation to us, sir. But how will it affect?
It's a very simple thing. I mean, countries that produce oil are making money. Countries like Pakistan that are importing oil are not making money. That's why we have a liquidity crunch. Coming back to the production element, countries that are producing oil are actually, they've had windfall profits. So I mean, I would sort of question, or I would think at least, why would a country want to reduce those profits? I mean, it's as simple as that. And to get extended windfall profits, that's like everybody's dream. Right now, OPEC countries, I was just going through the numbers, OPEC is still above 100, the basket price is still above 100. You have WTI crude, which is down to like around $93. But at the end of the day, oil is still very expensive. Whether you take OPEC or non-OPEC or whatever you want, oil is still expensive because it's being consumed somewhere. It's being literally consumed at a very heavy rate. Now, of course, if they bring in, you have to bring in, according to my estimates, around about 3 to 4 million additional barrels of oil per day to sort of ease the prices back down to, let's say, the mid-80s, which I doubt anyway. Why would...
Sir, the question, my question, in fact, let me rephrase it. My question was that either it is because since the growth rate is slow, so you understand that or is it more about the future where a lot of countries are thinking of increasing their oil storage, perhaps because they can see and they can forecast what if this happens. So currently, if you're looking at, is it the storage or is it the consumption?
I think it's more the latter, consumption. The storage aspect is there. I mean, we just recently, I think a month back or something, there was this release from the United States of America that they have sufficient supplies stored. That's what the release was. I don't know what the inside story is. But at the end of the day, I'm going back to the original point. The producers of oil are making money. It does not make sense to unnecessarily reduce that profit margin. They have had perhaps a dry run for many years. Some countries have been dying to make more money, and they are making more. By the way, Russia is also making money out of this spike in the oil price, and all that story about the 30% discounted Russian oil. You know, I would beg to differ, because I mean, you get to hear so many stories. Is it really 30% at a discount? I mean, I'm not going to get into that. At the end of the day, just to
it could be about the deferred payments also.
It could be, and re-answering your question, every country that is trying to conserve oil, because that's part of their strategic security policy. However, there is a massive increase in the consumption of oil. But let's not forget our friend speculation, because we have had a lot of excess liquidity on this earth due to COVID, as was discussed very recently. And
people were not traveling, no tourism, nothing at all.
Every country has printed more money, so they've got a lot of liquidity, and perhaps that is going to be...
is that the reason for high inflation? Or one of the reasons?
One of the reasons. It's always one of the reasons. And I mean, it's going to play up again, because every country, like if America has said that we're going to raise interest rates, even if it hurts their housing market, the US Fed is now going to jack it up 3 to 4 times, or perhaps 5 times.
Look what UK did.
But they have to do it. There's no other option. At the same time, you have a strengthening ruble, you have a weakening euro, you have many things happening at the same time.
Euro is almost equal to a dollar.
Yes, it is. And coming back to the oil thing, I think it doesn't make any sense for any oil producing country to reduce prices with more production.
I mean, that is a very, very interesting part. Sir, another important, I would say, point now. Let's throw light on this, Mr. Karel. The winter is approaching. I mean, the winter approaches much earlier in Europe as compared to South Asia. Like currently, we are almost at the end of the summer. The monsoon has started, and then we'll start feeling the, the cold breeze very soon in this part. And then, by the end of October, it's going to get cold. But when you talk about October in Europe, say you're talking about, a cold winter. So October, November, December, and then January, February, March, April, another 8 months. It's right around the corner, the winter. And obviously, sir, for ordinary people, it will mean colder homes and offices in the short run. Germany, for instance, wants public places heated only to 19 degrees Celsius. Heated. I mean, this is where we use our air conditioner.
Yeah.
So for you, it's heating. For us, it's a different ball game. Just try to understand this. And then secondly, the winter is around the corner. The war has not ended. You are looking at a greater demand of energy supply coming in from Russia, or you earlier mentioned it could be Norway, it could be Nigeria, it could be some other country like Azerbaijan for that matter. Qatar again is another small country but with huge gas reserves. Now, what do you see happening, sir? Because we never thought this war is going to prolong that long. But now it seems that it is not a matter of even months. It could take years. Mr. Karel, your take.
Well, first of all, I just want to complete what was said, that I also think there is a decision to keep the energy prices very high for two reasons. Is first that we had bankrupt parts of the, for example, shale gas and shale oil. 1 year ago, they were about to go bankrupt because the prices were too low. The competition was too hard for them, including solar power and wind power. So these whole parts are functioning because there's somehow a decision has been taken that it is good to have a very high energy price. Respecting the consumers in Europe, I fully agree it will be terrible because, first of all, the European Commission has suggested that that each country would lower by 15%. In reality, they lowered already on a voluntary basis by 15%. It's already done. The Commission wants another 15%. And if it cannot be done on a voluntary basis, then it will become imposed by law. And they say if this is not done, we will have to ration energy supplies to industry and agriculture, because the domestic consumption, it's about 30%. It's not the individual people which are the high consumers of electricity and gas. It's mainly industry. And transportation and agriculture. So we're going to a kind of energy dictatorship, which will impose rationing. And then rationing will be, in any case, done by the prices. I mean, I'm originally from Belgium, as you can see from my name. And there is a study of a Belgian university which says the average price for a household in Belgium will be 7,500 euros for gas and electricity. Now that's about 3 months of wages, for a normal family. So
almost
it's
35% of the total income that you have, which is coming in.
Yeah, I mean, so that's completely.
That's an alarming equation, by the way.
Yeah. Now, if you put all people in conditions where you lower the temperature, they turn sick and you develop epidemics. They will die. So it's not just money and figures. It's real people who are going to pay with their lives for what's being imposed on them right now.
But Mr. Karel, one important point now, since Europe is a rich region as compared to South Asia for that matter, and in particular, let's talk about Pakistan, so where there is a lot of financial crunch, economic problems are very much there, political instability again is another mega issue, I would say, in this part of the world. Recently, our Prime Minister was in Qatar, and we ended up getting some sort of a relief package from these countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar and UAE. And again, we got to know that $3 billion in addition will be invested by the Qatari companies. The point is that takes time, investment comes in, then whatever business they are into, I mean, that is not something which is going to provide you some immediate relief. But sir, let's suppose if this war is prolonged for another 6 months, what sort of an impact do you see on developing countries, and in particular a country like Pakistan, so which is largely dependent on the oil import? I'll just give you one example that 1 year or $1 billion deferred payment gives a lot of relief to our country, and that commitment has been made by Saudi Arabia. So a country which is in dire needs of dollars, a lot of money has gone abroad, a lot of people have withdrawn their money, dollar was hovering around 250 for the first time, and within no time it came back to 220, settling somewhere there. What I'm saying is, what do you see, sir? Pakistan was an exporting country as far as agriculture is concerned. Now we are importing 80% of our pulses, which is the main grain that people eat. Talking about wheat, we need another, in addition, 4 million tons of wheat. And primarily we're looking at either Russia or Ukraine. Your take, sir?
My take is first that we should have a real offensive on diplomacy and to stop this war. There is no individual solution for any country in the world. Second, this war we also have to settle the international financial bankrupt system. And that's why the Schiller Institute is calling for a new Bretton Woods conference, which would involve all partners to deal with the crazy debts, to go put some of the banks through bankruptcy procedures, and to come back to long-term contracts on energy and food, like on 20 years, guaranteed by state-to-state relationships, and to take it away out of the speculative markets. As long as we don't have this, I would suggest that Pakistan, it would be probably difficult from the diplomatic side, but go the same way what India is doing with Russia. The north-south, international north-south corridor, which goes from India through Iran up to Russia, is actually bringing a lot of energy and energy resources from Russia to Asia. And I think even if Pakistan and India can disagree on a lot of issues, I think in terms of survival, I think there would be probably inside the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the summit, which will take place in Samarkand on September, that this would be the right moment to work out long-term agreements for energy security and food security for mutual cooperation. I think Russia will be very much open for this kind of bilateral and multilateral discussions, and China will play its own useful role in this. But that's the defensive side, which of course has to be organized without forgetting the offensive side, to have this new Bretton Woods international monetary system, which would be putting the earth back in the right orbit.
Now, Faheem Saab, a couple of points that I've written down. I mean, Mr. Karel just gave the example of India. India, they are the blue-eyed boy, of the Americans. They have a strategic partner with the Russians. They have a strategic partnership with the Americans. They can do trade in rupee and ruble. They can buy oil from Russia. They can buy the military hardware. They're largely dependent on that. They can do trade with Iran also. There is no sanction. Even the Americans say, well, it's okay because, because the containing of the Chinese that is the major policy, which is a common goal, common interest of the Indians as well as the United States of America. They are a part of the Quad, and then the AUKUS. The Americans are always there, so we understand the kind of impression India is reflecting. When it comes to Pakistan, sir, remember IPI, which converted into IP, and then the Iranians built up the entire pipeline up to the border, and they were even ready. I remember Ahmadinejad said that we can give you, despite all odds, $250 million, and you can bring your pipeline up to this area, and then we'll start. Most likely last 3 months of the Pakistan People's Party's government. Anyway, nothing happened. There were sanctions on the Iranians. And we are an energy-thirsty country, sir. It's a reality. So, looking towards Russia, we all know what happened. I mean, let's not get into that detail because that is going to consume another couple of weeks, I would say, if we both sit here. My point is, sir, that Pakistan cannot do much. Obviously, whether we like it or we don't like it, the politics of the blocs exist. We can't close our eyes. Or can we, sir?
I think there's always some way to navigate through a terrain. That's why we use the word navigate. It's not impossible and it's not that difficult in the sense that one thing which is very critical for I think Pakistan and for every country for that matter is to negotiate a little harder, to to come to the brass tacks a little more quickly, and to get whatever you can from that agreement and then move on. For example, there's a concept of international barter markets. I mean, this is going to come up very soon, and why not be part of that? I mean, that basically is just one mechanism.
Sir, with Iran, for example, yes, barter trade. Sir, I still remember about 15 years ago or 14 years ago, we in fact ended up exporting rice worth of $1.2 billion. Just one product, one produce. Now the overall bilateral trade between these two countries is less than $1 billion.
Iran has been sanctioned by the United Nations. That's the difference.
If India can do trade, why can't we?
Certainly you can. You just need to
because smuggling is already taking place, my brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
130 rupees a litre Iranian petrol costs you in Karachi.
Exactly. So India has taken exemptions from the United Nations and from, let's say, America to conduct its trade. So we should go for the same thing. Every country that is looking after its own interests is quoting its own interest. For example, Hungary, coming back to Russia, Hungary has said that it cannot be part of a European Union complete sanction on Russian oil because Hungary is extremely dependent.
On them,
yeah, they quoted a pipeline, sorry, I've forgotten the name. But what I'm saying is every country has to look at its own interest, and Pakistan can navigate through this situation by more incisive and aggressive negotiations.
Well, let's see, sir. It seems that tough times are ahead. Closing remarks from you, Mr. Karel. Do you see things easing up, or you believe they will remain the same, or perhaps will get a little worse than what we are experiencing at the moment?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that seeing the course of the EU and the decisions and the energy crisis, I think there will be surprises in terms of financial bankruptcies and the consequences. The other thing is that the battle in Ukraine can get completely out of control, and because there is some kind of permanent people are not looking for a diplomatic solution, but for more war provocations. And this at one point will ricochet. Now Biden has a problem. That's maybe the good point, is that there will be the midterm elections in October, and Biden is probably going to lose. Most Americans are in favor of the war in Ukraine, but they're not in favor of paying higher energy bills. So Biden now is the United States trying desperately to get an agreement with Iran and try to bring down the oil prices. But that's failing so far, as my colleague said, for the various reasons, where everybody wants to have these windfall profits and keep, there are other factors maintaining a high energy price.
All right.
But that, there could be surprises. I mean, I'm very pessimistic on the current situation. I'm always very optimistic about the capacity of the human beings to find new solutions. And we see also new players like Indonesia, Turkey, which are not always perfect, but which can bring new aspects and new solutions into the game.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for your presence, Mr. Karel. Thank you very much, Faheem Sardar Sahab, for your input as well, sir. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow at 8:05 p.m. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.